Thank you.
Thank you so much, Clive. What a wonderful introduction. I hope I live up to that. And hello, everybody, and good evening. Thank you so much for coming to today's webinar. I'm super excited about talking about the perimenopause and the menopause because it's been seen traditionally as a taboo, hasn't it? And so it hasn't been talked about as much as it should have been, although now, which is very exciting, it's definitely getting talked about more. But as a result of that, lack of information, myths do abound. And so what I want to talk to you today is about exploring perhaps what are some of the biggest myths when it comes to the perimenopause and the menopause, and debunk them, and give you some practical strategies as well that you can take on board. Now, as Clive said, my interest is in women's health, and that came about because I wear a couple of hats, and one of the hats I wear is sports nutrition. And my very first job was as a performance dietitian or performance nutritionist. I was working with high-end sports teams. And I very soon started finding that a lot of the strategies that I was using with my male athletes, if I just tried to replicate the same strategies that my male athletes were thriving with my female athletes, the same thing just wasn't working. They weren't performing, or they weren't responding as well. So I kind of started thinking, okay, well, let me go back and look at the research. What does the research actually say? And what I very quickly found was that there's a very, very big data science gap when it comes to women's health. And just by it was Women's Health recently, so I did a presentation, so I've got this fact at the top of my fingertips. And in the last 5 years, in terms of sport and exercise science, there's been about, in probably the biggest sports and exercise journals, 6 of them, there's been 5,000 or so publications, and only 6% of those articles are specific or use women's subjects, for example. So you'll see there's a massive data gap when we're looking in general at women's health. And so that started getting me really interested in looking at, okay, well, how do I adapt things for my female athletes? How do I adapt things for my female clients? Because clearly, from what I was seeing on the ground in practice, is that us women are just not little men. We can't just extrapolate recommendations that there are for men. Fast forward a little bit, and as Clive was saying, I did a PhD in public health, and actually, one of the areas I wanted to focus on was menopause, and spent a whole year researching it, trying to collect data so that we could write and publish. And very soon I found the same problem. We're lacking research, we're not collecting the right information. So actually even doing a PhD around the menopause was a challenge, and I actually didn't end up doing that. I spent a year researching it, but I didn't end up doing it. But throughout that year, because I realized what of the massive gap that there was, it really sparked interest. And I'm just going to say that from the onset, that I am basically, I'm a co-founder as well of a women's health initiative that is called the Perimenopause Blueprint. And what we look at doing is educating women out there, so informing them about what happens to their body during the perimenopause and during the menopause. And we support and steer them in the direction so that they start feeling like they're in control of their hormones rather than their hormones controlling them. So what I'm going to do with you today is take you through a journey. And I don't know, I mean, I might have women who are in their 30s listening, I might have women who are in their 40s, women perhaps who have already gone through the menopause. So I want, wherever you are in your journey, I want to take you through what is happening and what you can do to get in control of your hormones in terms of looking at lifestyle. So let's begin. Menu for today, being a dietitian, it's all about food. My life evolves around food. And so this is what I've got cooked up for you. So we'll start off with some physiology. It's really important that you understand exactly what is happening to you on a hormonal level, because the more you understand what happens, the more some of the symptoms actually start making sense. And then actually the key in all of this is also realizing that you're an individual, yes. But once you understand what is happening to your hormones, maybe some of the symptoms you might be experiencing are actually due to hormones, not necessarily due to the fact that you're stressed out or it's just life and you just have to keep soldiering through with it. So again, bringing a level of information out there that empowers women to start identifying the fact that actually it's hormonal changes that might make a big difference. Okay, so what's happening to me? We're going to look at hormones, then we're going to look at the fact that now the narrative has changed. And because we're living longer, we're spending more of our lives in the postmenopause, and that's why it's really important for us to make sure that we get in control of our hormones, and rather look at this, the last third of our lives, with excitement rather than looking at it in terms of dread, which I think a lot of women actually end up doing. And the majority of the talk is going to be looking at debunking peri and menopause myths as well. So, there's so many myths out there. So I took what I, within my clinical practice, hear a lot. And those are the ones that I'm going to talk to you about. But absolutely, as Clive said, we're going to have questions and answers afterwards. So please feel free to write notes and write in the chat if I'm talking about things that perhaps is causing you to want to ask some questions, or just and then I can pick them up and answer them at the end as well. Okay, so let's get going. Sorry, my earphones come out. Okay, so what is the perimenopause? That's the first thing we have to explore. Okay, so basically, if only life worked like this in a perfect linear line. And in some ways, there are big hormonal changes that us women go through. So I've represented it in a linear way. So at the very beginning, we have what we call menarche, which is our first period. Okay, then we have regular menstruation as ladies. But then actually, if we fast forward to what happens at the end of this line, we've got the menopause. Now, the definition for menopause is basically not having periods for 12 consecutive months, okay? So after you have not had a period for 12 consecutive months, you basically go into postmenopause, which is basically life after that. So the perimenopause then, if we were to define it, is basically the change before the change. So now, biology operates on a continuum. So there's no single moment when menopause or the perimenopause begins. So the average age of the menopause in the UK is 51. Okay, but there's a number of factors that affect that. Genetics might affect it. So if you have a chat with your mother or your grandmother and find out when they were menopausal, that's sometimes gives an indication, but what we're seeing is there's other things that have an effect on that. Whether you smoke, you're more likely to have menopause earlier. Interestingly enough, when we're looking at the research, which is basically called, when we look at patterns of intake, epidemiology, we see that vegans and vegetarians, for example, might have earlier onset of menopause as well. And if you have a higher intake of omega-3 and B vitamins, whole grains, that seems to delay the menopause a little bit. So there's patterns like that, but in general, we're saying average age 51. So very similarly with the perimenopause, that again, if I'm generalizing it, would be happening around about 45. But you know what? That's not to say that it can't happen to women in their late 30s or even in their early 40s. And basically, you are perimenopausal from the time you have the very first symptom of any menopausal symptom. Now, that's where it's super vague, right? Because as you're soon going to find when I talk about the symptoms of menopause, the fact that you've got this hormone called estrogen, which has receptors in pretty much every single organ. You find those, that could be a hot flush, which is the most prevalent symptom, but it could be things like insomnia, not sleeping. It could be mood changes. It could be super dry skin and dry hair. It could be increase in urinary tract infections. There's a whole host of different symptoms that you could have. And basically, you can be having a regular period, or perhaps your cycle might be changing a very little bit in terms of a slightly shorter cycle, slightly longer cycle. But basically, you're just finding that you're starting to experience one or two, or maybe even more of some of the symptoms of the menopause, but you're not necessarily menopausal because you're still having periods, even if they maybe are not as regular as before. Now, what's really interesting about the perimenopause is it could be weeks, it could be months, it could be years, it could be a decade. And therefore, this is why we have to make sure that actually we're aware of what the symptoms are so that we can get on top of it. And also we know what lifestyle strategies we can put into place so that fundamentally we are helping ourselves and we are getting on top of our hormones as well. Okay, so basically perimenopause is the time before menopause, but that is variable from woman to woman. And it's really important that we are starting to be aware of what the symptoms are so that we can kind of start linking it to, that could be perimenopause, actually could be hormonal changes, and maybe I need to do something about it. Maybe I need to talk to my GP about hormone replacement therapy, or actually maybe I need to start changing some dietary factors or some lifestyle factors just to make sure I'm helping myself. Okay, so what is happening to me? So what happens on a hormonal level is very, very important. So if you think back to puberty, the whole process took quite a few years. And so do the changes linked with the perimenopause and the menopause. I think that society is much kinder to our teenagers who are thought to be when they're hormonal, right? Because it's fine for them to have bad moods and to get away with stuff. But actually, when you look at what's happening on a hormonal level with women who are perimenopausal, they have the same fluctuating hormones going on. And yet society is very much not very aware of that or kind to us in that aspect. So basically, you have two main female hormones. These are called estrogen and progesterone. Okay, so these hormones are produced by your ovaries. But actually, even before they're produced by your ovaries, there's parts in your brain that signal to other two hormones called follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, that then you should release these other two hormones that are produced by your ovary, which are estrogen and progesterone. So they are called reproductive hormones. But as you're going to find out in the next slide, is they're not just involved in reproduction, although their main function is menstrual cycle and preparing us for pregnancy. Okay, so what happens basically is, and you'll see I've got two slides here, and I want to show, I've got two graphs here. And the reason why I've got the two graphs is because they show slightly different things. Okay, so here we go. So from the age of 35, actually, we're already starting to decrease these female hormones. So you can see that progesterone, there's a massive decrease in terms of how much progesterone we produce as ladies. And that's a 75% reduction from the age of 35 to about 50, which is when on average, a woman is going to become menopausal. And you'll see that estrogen, we always actually at menopause, there's always a slightly higher ratio of estrogen than there is progesterone. But you can see there's also a decline in estrogen as well. Okay, so basically what happens is the fact that we're producing less of these two hormones is what elicits all the symptoms that we end up experiencing, because fundamentally, as I've said already, these hormones are involved in more than just the reproductive functions. But what's also really interesting that I think is shown quite well here, although I would like this pink line to be kind of more starting off here, is actually, it's not just a decline like this. If only it was a decline like that. It's more up and down like this. And this is why in the perimenopause, you have the hormonal ups and downs, which create and contribute to what seems like seemingly random and unpredictable physical and psychological manifestations that a lot of women actually experience. Because basically, as hormone levels change physically and mentally, we also change as well. Now, a hormone I haven't mentioned that I think I should really mention that is also really important is testosterone. So testosterone is basically known as the male hormone. Okay, so males, yes, absolutely, they have a higher percentage of testosterone than we do. But ladies, we have testosterone as well. And testosterone is really important for us because it boosts our metabolism. It helps us preserve our muscle mass, very important. And it also is really useful in terms of our libido. And what happens is also in the perimenopause is that there's a gradual decline in testosterone as well. And actually, by the time we're menopausal, we have less than half of the amount of, we only have a little bit of testosterone on board, but we actually only have less than half of it. And very often, if you are already menopausal, for example, or perimenopausal, and you've been having conversations with your doctor, your GP, and you're open to the idea of hormone replacement therapy, they might be talking about putting on different progesterone and estrogen creams, but they might also start saying, hey, put on a testosterone cream or a testosterone patch as well. So really important that we remember there's two main hormones, female hormones, but testosterone also plays quite a big role in terms of perimenopause as well. Okay, so what's really important is that hormones basically signal our body to do stuff. important stuff. And so they act widely throughout the body. And I just want to emphasize here, this is a slide basically doing the PR job for estrogen, because I feel that estrogen definitely does not have a good PR company behind it, because for all that it does, my goodness me, you hear lots of people talking about the importance of testosterone, but you don't hear people talking about the importance of estrogen. And so I just want to start emphasizing that, because it's a pretty useful hormone. Okay, so this is what it does. It basically helps us stabilize our moods. And so this is why when we have fluctuations in terms of our hormones, our moods go all over the place. And what's really interesting is that if you can experience this even if you're not perimenopausal because of PMS, okay? You know, fluctuations in hormones, you feel slightly different. Some people experience it more than others. When we also look at women who are experiencing postnatal depression as well, the interesting thing is that when they look at the amount of estrogen they've got on board, they have the high in terms of estrogen when they're pregnant. And then suddenly, because they've given birth, they have a massive drop in terms of estrogen. And a lot of studies are actually showing that that also exacerbates postnatal depression. So it's not surprising then if that us women going through the perimenopause or through the menopause with these fluctuating hormones are going to have mood and emotional disturbances. And also the fact that in our brain, there's estrogen receptors. So estrogen helps us think more clearly, remember things. And so one of the symptoms that tends to be associated with the perimenopause and the menopause is women just say brain fog. I'm in a board meeting, Linia, and they're asking me something, and I actually, for the life of me, go completely blank and I cannot think, And if we're thinking about it now that we're living longer and perhaps you're going to be in the prime of your career, actually having brain fog or having less than ideal cognitive function is not going to be ideal as well. So we need it to stabilize our moods. We need it for us to be sharp on the ball. We also need it in terms of how we respond to stress. And this is probably linked more to the fact that, it's a pretty challenging time, because a lot of women I would speak to in clinic almost say to me, Linia, I just don't recognize myself. The simple things and the big things. I'm not sleeping as a result of that, because estrogen basically affects temperature levels, which means that women experience hot flushes and night sweats. That means they're up all night as well. So the fact that they're not sleeping, and when we sleep is when we restore and we regenerate and we do emotional processing. So everything just starts becoming an accumulation. And the fact then is that we end up not responding well to stress, yes, because of our hormonal fluctuations, but also because the fundamental pillars that help us become more resilient, like good sleep and good nutrition, very often go out of sync. And not surprisingly, because if you're not sleeping well, then you're producing more cortisol, which then makes you, crave having croissants in the morning rather than having oats porridge. And then basically what happens with your hormonal profile as well is that your metabolism changes. So suddenly you're not processing carbohydrates the same as when you were in your early 30s. And now if you eat slightly more calories than you're burning, you put on weight, but not around your hips and your bum, it goes around the middle of around your belly. Okay, so naturally a lack of estrogen does change our metabolism, does change the way that we process things. And so we need to change our strategy. What we did in our 20s and 30s, early 30s, is not going to work in your 40s. So how are you going to change some of those strategies? So I could go on and on and on, but I think what I just want to emphasize here is basically hormones are important. When they change, we change, and the symptoms are far and wide-reaching. So we must change the narrative. Why? Because look at this. In the 1900s, we were the same. Women experienced menopause more or less the same time, 51. But they were dying at 59. So they only spent 8 years in the menopause, postmenopausal. Now, average age in the UK of death is 83. So we're spending a good third of our lives in the menopause, in the postmenopausal. That has implications in terms of long-term health, absolutely, because lack of estrogen, yes, in the short term, it causes symptoms like the weight gain, like hot flushes, mood, etc. But in the long term, it also increases our risk of cardiovascular disease. Our bones become weaker. And so how do we then make sure that we're eating well, not just for the short term to try ease off the symptoms, but also for the long term, so we don't increase our risk of dementia and Alzheimer's? Because ladies, we have a higher risk just because we're ladies, because of the fact that we've got less estrogen on board. Okay, so really important that if we're spending more and more time postmenopausal, that there's a big need for us to learn how to manage the season, so that rather than just bearing it, we can actually thrive through it. And so you'll see over here just some quotes from the Menopause Charity. They did a survey with actually the realities that women are experiencing. Majority of women say, yeah, absolutely, the menopause affects them at work. They just almost want to have reduced work hours. And a couple of them even went to disciplinary just because the fact that their hormones were working against them, which is incredibly unfair. Okay, so let's start debunking some of the myths. Are you ready? It happens suddenly at the age of 50. That's what is one of the myths out there. And actually, I hope by now, if I was to say, type out in the chat whether you think this is true or not, from what I've already said, I'm sure that you're already thinking, would it be nice if everything in life was so predictable? But unfortunately, it's not. The onset of your menstruation isn't. If you have children, childbirth isn't, and neither is the perimenopause or the menopause. So as I've said to you, absolutely, it begins around the age of 51, but you can start experiencing symptoms as early as your late 30s or even your late or early 40s. And so actually what's really important is I hope that I do have some women who are in their late 30s or early 40s listening who are not menopausal, because this is basically about saying, hey, how do I maximize what I'm doing now to make sure that actually as I go through it, I'm not going to struggle as much, and I'm going to make sure that actually I'm thriving in it rather than struggling in it. And that's what fundamentally, when we set up the perimenopause blueprint, that's what it was about, because the fundamentals in terms of diet, lifestyle, whilst we're all individuals, absolutely, the fundamentals of what we should all be doing are more or less the same for all of us. And so this is really important, because, another myth is, okay, the early 40s are too early to start thinking about the perimenopause or the menopause, and absolutely not. They are the opportune time to start getting yourself ready. So this, and I'm going to show you a study later, which shows that actually what you start doing within the perimenopause in your early 40s is crucial to what's going to happen in your 50s as well. And so also it's about learning and knowing what your normal is like, right? I've talked about the fact that the perimenopause is the time when you start experiencing the first symptom. If you're not even aware of what the symptoms are, if you don't even know what your normal is in terms of what is your normal mood like? Do you know? What is your muscle mass? What vaginal changes are going to happen? What does your vagina look like now? If you don't even know what your normal is now, you're not going to know when changes start happening. So this is also about knowing what your normal is, so that when the changes do happen, you're on it and you're able to seek the help that you actually need. This is an interesting one. I'm going to spend a little bit of time here because this is what we tend to see a lot of. Okay, so weight gain is inevitable. Is it? What do you think? Yes or no? Well, definitely is a challenge because your metabolism changes. And we talked about this. So the less estrogen, the less testosterone means basically you're going to be losing muscle mass. So naturally, two things are happening. As you age, you have a process called sarcopenia, which means there is a decrease in muscle mass as you age, naturally, because you're aging. Then add in there estrogen. Less estrogen, less testosterone means women have an accelerated loss of muscle mass compared to men. Now, muscle mass needs to be your friend, because the more muscle you got on board, the more you can get away with the extra glass of wine or the extra amount of cheese, because basically muscle is metabolically more active than fat. So if I'm sitting here and my body composition has a higher percentage of fat, of muscle, it means that basically I'm burning more calories at rest, not even doing anything. And so that basically it means that you can get away with eating more. So your metabolism changes because your muscle mass changes. Yes, fundamentally, we know that. So that's physiology working against you. But because I've mentioned two things, so it's muscle. So muscle's made out of protein. So what you need to make sure you're protecting your muscle is to make sure that at least you're getting your protein right, so that you're protecting your muscle. So if you're getting older, you're then lowering your estrogen, and then you're not eating enough protein, you're basically on a downward trend to losing even more muscle mass. So we need to make sure we're eating enough protein. We need to make sure we're doing the right type of exercise, because muscles need to be stimulated. You need to be doing resistance exercise to make sure you're protecting your muscle mass as well. Okay, so small changes like that suddenly mean that actually we're doing lots of cardio in our 20s and early 30s. Suddenly the cardio needs to decrease, and you need to be doing more weight training to protect your muscle mass. You store fat differently. I've mentioned this. So before, ladies, we tend to store fat more around our hips and our bum. With the decreasing estrogen, that increases our risk of storing fat around our abdomen. So you talk about pear shape to apple shape. That is what the lack of estrogen does. So naturally, you're going to be more kind of apple shape. But that's not to say, again, it's inevitable. You metabolize fuel differently, totally. You become much more sensitive to carbohydrates. So this is when we need to start being more wary about what type of carbohydrates we take on board. That's not to say we can never have cake, but it's when you're having the cake, how much of the cake you're having, what are the carbohydrates you're getting on board, when are you eating those carbohydrates? All those things become much, much more important, not just in terms of helping some of the symptoms like preventing weight gain or boosting your mood and helping brain function, or even reducing hot flushes, but also in terms of the long term, because I talked a little bit about long-term health. Women are more likely to have an increased risk of cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes. So your cholesterol levels might have been all good all your life till your mid-30s, and suddenly you get perimenopausal and your cholesterol levels change. And that's because we're getting changes in the way that we metabolize our fuel. So again, fundamentally making sure that we're on top of that in terms of what we eat. But that all said, I'm not creating a very nice picture, but whilst your physiology, unfortunately, is working against you, this is where the empowerment comes in. Because if you know that actually, hold on, I need to protect my muscle mass, I need to make sure I'm balancing my blood sugar levels, then actually weight gain does not have to be inevitable. And actually, you can make sure that you actually go through the perimenopause and the menopause and actually don't end up gaining weight. So, and this is a study that I came across recently, and I loved it because this just emphasized what I'm talking about in terms of the fact that the perimenopause, early 40s, are when you need to start actually making sure that you get on top of things. So basically, without getting too nerdy on this, the study was basically looking at a group of about 70 women, and they looked at women in different phases of their lives. They looked at those who weren't even in their early 30s. They looked at those who were perimenopausal, so 40s, and they looked at those who were menopausal. And basically, they did a couple of things. They said, we're going to make sure you do different types of training in terms of HIIT, so high intensity interval training or resistance exercise, and we're going to see what happens in terms of your body composition and your menopause symptoms. But what I'm just going to focus on here is actually, you'll see here this graph, and if we just interpret this graph very easily, we see that in the perimenopause, basically any changes you make have the biggest impact on your metabolism if you're making them in your 20s in relation to what is then going to happen in your 50s. That's not to say if you're already 50 now you can't make changes, but what I'm trying to say is actually the message we need to be getting out there more and more is, ladies, this is not just something we need to think about when we're approaching 50, 48, 49, 50. Actually, this is something we need to think about in your late 30s and early 40s as well. Okay, so make sure that we start thinking about it early. So how do you get on top of your weight if we know that the physiology is working against you? And if I've told you that the perimenopause is the period when we need to be capitalizing and making sure that we're getting the right body composition there to make sure that actually we don't then have the physiology working against us. Well, you know what? The first thing that is the fundamental thing in nutrition, this is a slide you've got to take a photo of, control your blood sugar levels, and your world will be a much happier place. And how do you control your blood sugar levels? Okay, so you'll see here on the graph is that your blood sugar levels are controlled within quite a tight boundary. and this is, if I was to put numbers to it, this will be about 4, this will be about 8. Okay, so life is good when my blood sugar levels are within this green. Okay, when my blood sugar levels are above the green or below the green, life becomes a bit stressful physiologically for your body, because now and again no problem, but if we start thinking, what tends to happen is, think of if you've got children, or you've seen kids who go to a birthday party, eat lots of cake. What happens? They run around super hyper, and then they basically crash, tantrums and all that. And so basically with your blood sugar levels, the higher you get them, the quicker they crash. And basically as soon as your levels go below the bottom amount, your body perceives that as stress. So, and if your body starts perceiving that as stress, it does 2 things. It says, hey, Linia, you're stressed. And when you're stressed, I need you to have more blood sugar in your blood so you can run away, because inherently we produce stress hormones to take us out of danger. But what's happening now is that we're constantly living in stressful lives. And then what happens is, nutritionally, if you then add a nutritional stress of poor blood sugar control, this is when it actually does not work for you, because your stress hormone cortisol causes you to break your muscle mass, which you're already losing because you're reducing your estrogen levels, to produce sugar, which I then have in my blood. Okay, so this is fundamentally what we've got to do here, is we've got to make sure we're managing our blood sugar control, ladies. This is really, really important, because not only does it help in terms of weight control, but it also helps in terms of energy levels. We know that with less estrogen, our energy levels tend to go up and down. Okay, energy levels, mood, etc., etc. How do we do that? Making sure you're eating the right type of carbohydrates. So I was talking about slow release, low glycemic index carbohydrate, whole grains, that type of thing. If you do eat refined carbohydrates, like if you are having a cupcake here and there, it's all about portion control. How much of that are you actually having, to make sure you're controlling your blood sugar levels? And also making sure that you're balancing that meal out. So making sure you're getting protein in there. We talked about the importance of protein protecting our muscle mass, but also protein being a very complex molecule means that it takes a little bit longer for us to digest. Okay, so that's why I had a steak last night, and this morning I woke up and I wasn't that hungry, because you know what, I was probably still digesting the big steak that I had last night. So protein is a very complex molecule that we want to be including at every single meal, just to make sure we're helping control our blood sugar levels as well. Okay, so eat the right type of carbohydrates, get the balance in there in terms of the macronutrients. So making sure particularly you're getting enough protein on board to protect your muscle mass, yes, but also to make sure you control your blood sugar levels. And then, there's an element of, and we talk about this in the perimenopause blueprint, how you balance out your blood sugar levels. So when are you eating? How are you eating? What are you eating? But also understanding the fact that, a lot of the time is that we're emotional eaters. And particularly because during perimenopause, I get women coming to me and saying, like, I'm a former shadow of myself. I don't know what's happening to me. Like, I can't recognize myself, so emotionally it's a very stressful time. So no wonder women are then looking, to try and get comfort from food or alcohol to try and, numb the emotions or whatever else is going on. But then we've also got to look at, when you are eating, can we get some mindful eating in there? What is, are you eating when you're hungry, or are you eating when you're in emotional hunger? What does that actually look like? So what you eat is important, but when you are eating is also very, very important. Okay, so we've talked about weight gain. I hope that's made it clear and given you some practical strategies. This is an interesting one. Hot flushes are the only symptom you have when you're perimenopausal. Well, so hot flushes are the classic symptom and the most common symptom, affecting 75 or if not 85% of women. And they tend to, if you've not experienced them before, that can tend to come on suddenly at any time, and they kind of spread through the face, the body, and basically they tend to be accompanied with symptoms like you sweat, or you might feel dizzy, you find you've got heart palpitations. And the exact reasons why women get hot flushes is not known. It could be the fact that they've got estrogen that's going up and down, but more so I think the research is pointing to the fact that the estrogen going up and down basically triggers another hormone called noradrenaline, which is a stress hormone, and noradrenaline actually regulates your temperature, and so that's the cascade that causes it. But you know what, so whilst most people do experience hot flushes, I think in the first slide when we're talking about what's happening to your body, you'll very quickly note that hot flushes are one symptom of many. And actually, when I was putting these slides together, I just wanted to literally fill the slide with all the possible symptoms you could have. There are just so many symptoms out there. I mean, I've just put some here: mood changes, joint pain. Interesting. Exercise feels so hard. And that's because estrogen is involved in actually preventing inflammation and also just the lubrication that we need in terms of our joints. Vaginal health I've talked about, which is an interesting one. So menopause is already perimenopause seen as a taboo. Vaginal health, people don't talk about that as well. And 50% of women experience problems in terms of vaginal health again, but they don't even reach out about it because they're just not talked about. So again, things like dry skin and dry hair, dry mouth are also important ones as well. So hot flushes are a common symptom, but I promise you there are lots of other symptoms. Headaches, migraines are another one, period changes, of course, libido, low libido, the list goes on. Know your symptoms, track your symptoms. It would be the message I'd leave you there. So this is an interesting one. Soya foods are bad for you. Okay, so what's really interesting is that the research first looking into soya came about because researchers found a really interesting correlation. They found that women in Asia seem to experience the menopause differently to how women in the West experienced it. So they started kind of trying to understand it a bit more. And one of the things that they found, yes, there were genetic elements to it, but there were other lifestyle elements as well. But one of the key differences was the fact that women in Asia consumed 20 to 80 milligrams of isoflavones. Okay, so soya basically contains, is a phytoestrogen, which means it is a plant-based form of estrogen. Okay, so it's an estrogen that basically does the same as the estrogen in our body, but at a weaker level. And basically it contains these isoflavones, which are your precursors to the estrogen. So they basically were eating soya-based foods more or less every single day, in comparison to women in the West who were only eating soya-based foods very minimally. So in terms of isoflavone concentration, they were only looking at eating them 3 milligrams a day. And actually researchers found that was having a massive impact on the prevalence of hot flushes. So you can see in Asia, only 25% of women experience hot flushes, whereas in the West, it's 75 or 85%. And recent research has just shown that actually, if in the West, we were to include more soy-based foods in our diet, particularly when we are menopausal, then that could alleviate our hot flushes. They could do two things to our hot flushes: the frequency and also how intense those hot flushes come along as well. So the amount that we're talking about is 50 to 100 milligrams of soya per day. Now, what's interesting is that, so you can think of things like soya milk or tofu or edamame beans or even soya yogurt. So in about 250 mils of soy milk or 250 mils of yogurt, you have about 25 milligrams of isoflavone. So you're looking to have about 2 portions of phytoestrogens every day to have that effect. And it takes a while. So for the phytoestrogens or the isoflavones to actually accumulate in your body. So you have to do it for at least 2 or 3 months before you see that effect. The more processed the soya, the less isoflavones there are on board. So, if you can kind of stick it to these type of foods, good. If you're kind of going to soya sausages and soya burgers, fine now and again, but definitely wouldn't be looking to lean on those. Okay, just looking conscious of time, I better speed up. Okay, menopause brings on the blues. Is that right? Unfortunately, it is right. And, hormonal shifts affect your mood. And so it's not very uncommon to basically, and I think the psychological element of the perimenopause is not talked about enough. These are some of the things women experience. They struggle to concentrate, they have poor memory, they have brain fog. I've talked about that. Massive mood swings, anxieties, super teary, and just frustrated because it all feels like hard work. So we absolutely know that that's what's happening. So what can we do to help? Well, absolutely stabilize your hormones, go see your GP, make sure that you're doing what you need to do in terms of the medical element of the perimenopause. But in terms of the lifestyle factors, these are the things that we talk about in terms of the perimenopause blueprint. Hydrate. Your brain is 85% water. 75 to 80% water. I exaggerated there, but I hope I got the message across. Okay, if even if you're not menopausal, anybody who's dehydrated, by the time I'm dehydrated, I feel thirsty. So thirst is not a very good indicator of your hydration status. So by the time I'm thirsty, my brain size shrinks. So fundamentally, if we know dehydration has an impact on your brain size, which then would affect your cognitive function, add in hormones there. You're not going to be helping yourself if you are then going through life slightly dehydrated. So make sure you hydrate well, have a strategy that works, get in there early, get on top of it. These are small changes that will have a profound impact in terms of energy and mood. Get your omega-3s in there. The building blocks of the neurons in your brain are basically omega-3s. So commonly known, there's one omega-3 which is really good, which is called deoxyhexanoic acid, which is basically found in oily fish. But if we're not oily fish fans, we can also find it in things like walnuts and flax seeds. And interestingly enough, walnuts and flax seeds contain something called lignans. Remember I was talking to you about soya having isoflavones, which have that estrogen property? Well, lignans are another plant-based foods that basically have also, to a weaker extent, that same effect in terms of your phytoestrogen. So you know what, ladies? Flaxseed on flipping everything. So a good tablespoon of flaxseed on everything is not a bad shout either. And make sure you're getting your oily fish in there as well. Whole grain, fundamental for blood sugar control. The fiber feeds our gut bacteria. You're in your gut bacteria. Gut bacteria are responsible for producing 95% of the serotonin that you make. Serotonin is your happy hormone. Hey, we want to be happy, we want to stabilize our mood. Feed your gut bacteria because they produce the hormone that is actually used, that kind of transfers up to your brain to regulate your mood. So make sure you go whole grain, and also whole grains contain B vitamins. B vitamins are fundamental to supporting us, particularly when we're going through periods of stress and boosting our mood in general. I've talked about the importance of lean protein, but also lean protein contains an amino acid called tryptophan, which is a precursor to serotonin, another happy hormone, which then also produces melatonin, which helps us sleep. So it's all kind of tied together. But I'm going to end off with saying, vegetables. Always, I can never do a talk about energy and mood without talking about the importance of the phytochemicals that we tend to find in different colors of fruit and vegetables. And interestingly enough, particularly calciferous vegetables, so your broccoli, your cabbages, your sprouts, etc., they also have factors in them that have a mild estrogenic effect as well. So including them is going to be a good thing as well. So, I'm a dietitian. Nutrition is my jam. That's what I do. I talk food. But I know fundamentally especially from working performance sports, that or working in any kind of team, that is about being a part of a multidisciplinary team. I can be the best dietitian out there giving the best advice, but if you're not doing the other things, then no diet is necessarily going to work. So you need to make sure you're still doing all the other things, like you're sleeping, like you're getting your exercise right, the activity in there, like what's going on in your mind, the self-talk, the conversations you're having as well are also in a good space, right? So I think this slide is very much to say, it has to be holistic. Nutrition plays a fundamental role, but actually nutrition is only going to work if you get the other bits right. Because if you're stressing out and you've got poor self-talk, you're going to still be producing the stress hormone, which then is going to be working against the things that I'm going to be recommending in terms of what you should eat. And then coming to the end now, you have to tough it out. I hope by now you know that that's not true. Now, which is really good, is that the menopause is getting so much more headspace than it has ever before. Louise Newton formed the Menopause Charity, which is fantastic. It's a free resource. There's lots of information out there that you could tap into. Things like symptom checkers and questions you should go to your GP to talk about. Talk to your GP about it. Include him in your journey. But what's even better is if you go to your GP informed. So what are your symptoms? What is your normal? So what do you want to get out of it? Read up about HRT. Is HRT for you, or other lifestyle factors for you? So just things like Menopause Matters, the Perimenopause Blueprint, because we look at it in terms of supporting the lifestyle factors that are fundamental as well. Okay. And just ending off with the fact that ultimately it is about making sure that we're introducing these fundamentals of how we live, getting movement right, making sure you're eating the right stuff, controlling your stress, looking at alcohol and caffeine, not to say you can't have it, but perhaps understanding that you're processing them slightly different. So understanding how you can make them work for you in your lifestyle, so they don't exacerbate symptoms, but actually you're able to incorporate them and still recover as well. So that's all really important. So how do we take action? Well, hashtag own your perimenopause or own your menopause. So you can be in control of your hormones if you are equipped with the right information. So this is very much about saying, you obviously, ladies, you're interested because you joined up for this webinar, but I hope what I've done is inspired you to say, hey, what else can I do? Who can I have conversations with? Where can I take this to make sure that I'm maximizing the next phase of my life so that I'm thriving rather than struggling through it? And this is just some more information about the perimenopause blueprint if you're interested in it in terms of a lifestyle point of view. And I think that has come to an end. So I've left 10 minutes for questions, and I'm happy to take questions now, but I hope that I have gone through a lot of the myths that perhaps you might have thought of or wanted to know more about.
That was fantastic, Linia. Thank you very much indeed. I've got, because